Welcome everyone to MailFuzz Movies. I am Peter, and just about a week ago I did my top 10 movies of 2025, and I want to do a little follow-up to that with not the worst movies of 2025, because a lot of the worst ones are kind of obvious, and I've reviewed them on either Streams or Ace or maybe on Extra Reels on Patreon, but I wanted to do what movies disappointed me. Now, some of these might be in that really, really bottom end of the spectrum, but I want to do a top 5 movies, or 5 most disappointing movies is maybe a better way of phrasing it, because I think that's the interesting stuff, right? It's one thing when Strangers Chapter 2 or the War of the Worlds movie that Amazon put out, which is all about advertising Amazon delivery services and drones. Right, obviously they're terrible, but the movies that should be better, or I expected to be better, and then ended up kind of sucking for one way or another, I think those are the more interesting things to talk about as far as disappointments and negatives go. So, without further ado, I'll just do a simple, 5 worst or 5 biggest disappointments of 2025. Starting off number 5 with Mickey 17. Now, Mickey 17 is not a terrible movie by any stretch. It's not even a bad movie. It's fine. It's a fine movie. It's got some qualities which are pleasant enough. Some quirky performances and sense of humor and so on. But this is the movie from the guy that directed Parasite. Parasite, which is bordering on a 10 out of 10, right? It might even just be a 10 out of 10. One of the best movies of the last 10 years. Absolute show stealer, completely well-layered film that does have some dark comedy in it, but it's full of tense sequences and just absolutely oozing social commentary, and it's just thrilling from start to finish. Like, can't say enough nice things about it. And the next movie he goes to make is Mickey 17, which is a sci-fi comedy with a fairly big budget, starring Robert Pattinson as a guy who keeps getting cloned, and every time he dies they just pump out another clone, hence the fact that he's number 17. That's the idea, right? He's on this deep space mission with a crew, and it goes into his love life and goes into all these other things, and the problem really is just that it's aggressively just okay. Like, it's quirky, but it never really kind of rises to having the level of stakes that got me really invested, or where I was really like rooting for the outcome. And then there's a lot of CG, like a lot of ropey CG. There's like CG creatures and stuff like that. And the funny thing about it is that the director has this kind of almost like predictability, right? So as much as I'm saying this one's disappointing and I was hoping I was going to love it, I had a worry that I might feel this way about it, because for some reason every time Bong Joon-ho does a sci-fi movie, despite the fact that I love science fiction, right? I do a whole movie podcast, a sci-fi movie podcast, right? Because I love the genre. All of his worst movies for me are all of his sci-fi movies. Okja, I think Snowpiercer, like, I'm lukewarm on all of them. But his other movies, Parasite being at the tip top, but Memories of Murder, he did a movie called Mother, like, these are good, great, excellent movies. It's so weird, and I was hoping this was going to break that weird curse of every time he does a sci-fi movie I don't think it's that good. But here it is, Mickey 17. Like, it's not a bad movie. I'm not saying it's like one of the worst movies of the year. It's right in the middle of the pack ultimately, but for the guy who just made Parasite, it's actually pretty disappointing. So it's at number 5 because it's definitely not the worst movie here by any stretch, but I wanted to love it. I wanted to come out of it and say, oh, this is a modern sci-fi, like, maybe masterpiece is a strong word, but like a modern sci-fi must-see kind of story. Something that's enthusiastic, that says, hey, science fiction is booming again, and it's, this thoughtful story that makes you think about things. And honestly, I was just kind of annoyed by a lot when I watched it and just not feeling that invested in it. And I wish I cared about it more. So Mickey 17 is number 5. Number 4 disappointing movie of the year, I'm going to go with Keeper, which is Osgood Perkins. Now, he also did The Monkey in 2025, which I liked a bit more than this, but not like, not like a ton. It was, it's still far from his best, but Osgood Perkins is a very good director. And I do actually think that Keeper is still very well directed. I was really enjoying the first half or so of the movie because I thought it was really tense. I thought the way it was teasing things in the background and like all the stuff with just, the growing paranoia and tension of Tatiana Maslany in this like house, this cabin in the woods on her own, starting to worry about why she's there and what's happening. It did some stylistic things at the start that kind of like, poked at a backstory where it did all these little flashbacks that I thought was very creative. Unfortunately, though, where it goes in the story, I think, is just a bit of a dud. And the more it revealed about what was going on, the less and less interesting it was. So this is actually an interesting case of, like, I mean, I had fairly good hopes getting into it because Osgood Perkins is a good director, but I wasn't necessarily thinking, oh, this looks amazing. But this one's more disappointing because the first, like, chunk of it set me up to be really, really excited and like, oh, I think I like this movie quite a bit. And then only for it to kind of start to chip away, and the entire kind of third act just not working for me. Didn't like where it went, and it kind of went away from what I was enjoying about it as it went on. And I think that's a shame. I think it's a case of the script just going in a direction that I just do not like. But I still think it's well directed, but it's disappointing for all those reasons. So that's number 4. Number 3. And we're getting into like a movie that I'm not going to say really too much positive about, is Drop. Now, Drop is a thriller about a woman who goes on it's kind of a blind date. I mean, I think she's been talking to this guy on like dating apps or whatever, but she goes on this date, and when she's on the date at this fancy restaurant, which is in a sort of high floor in a skyscraper, she gets messages saying that her child is in danger if she doesn't do what she's told, which is to do stuff for this mysterious person sending her texts and messages. And it's all about kind of making her do kind of spy stuff, but she's like trying to like think around it and like, how do I alert someone for help? How do I, without breaking the rules that the culprit is set up? Because the culprit's like, hey, you can't do this, you can't speak to them. If you try and leave the restaurant, your kid's dead. If you try and do this, your kid's dead. Like, there's all these rules, and she tries to think a way around them. The reason why this is disappointing is twofold for me. One, I quite like Christopher Langdon, who directed it. I really like Happy Death Day. I think Happy Death Day is a fun movie. Freaky was just okay, but like, I didn't love it, but it was decent enough. It was fun, but it wasn't as good as Happy Death Day by any stretch. But this was something a little bit different. And then the other reason why I was looking forward to this is because I actually think the premise is fantastic. I think the premise is exceptionally good for a thriller. I can see all the inventive ways you could start playing with this idea of her not being able to tell her date that she's under duress and she's having to pretend that everything's okay, and all the ways she's trying to get out messages or think of around the rules of the game that she's been put into. There's so much potential there. All one location thriller, focusing on details, focusing on who's around her, is the bad guy in the room kind of thing. All that stuff sounds amazing. Like if Hitchcock made this, as stupid as that sounds, it's exactly what I want. I want the Hitchcock version of this plot. Instead, we got this like try hard, we want to be slick and cool, we're going to have text messages popping up on the screen, we're going to have all these quick cuts, everything's going to feel super fast paced, which I think is the terriblest, that's not even a word, the most terrible choice they could have made, because I want the slow build, I want the tension, I want the feeling that she's being watched and that she's trying to pull things off, and instead it's doing a lot of these quick cut reactions. It's doing all like the editing style in that movie turned me off. And then it also had a problem that the Keeper had, which is every direction it went in the plot beyond just the core setup and premise of what it was less and less exciting and interesting. And the actual reveal of who's behind everything and why they're doing it is the most like just unsatisfying, bland possible choice that could have been made. I like it sucked all of the air out of it sucked all the mystery out of it. But even before that point, I wasn't enjoying how it was directed. I wasn't enjoying how the set pieces and the little attempts she was making to try and pull things off were being handled. it just felt like such a whiff to me, because I think the actual core premise of it sounds like a great movie idea. That a good director, right? You know, maybe not Hitchcock, and not that we've got a choice, he's been dead for a while, but someone could really direct the hell out of this premise and make it a super exciting, intimate thriller. Instead, we get a lot of, like, I don't know, just overacting as well was the other thing. Like, there was a lot of really kind of in-your-face performances when it felt like it should be more subtle. We should be really, like, doubting the people around her. Is someone in on it? Are they not in on it? All that kind of thing. And it felt like it was whiffing on every possible level that I could have enjoyed it on, and I really wanted to like it. So Drop is my number 3 most disappointing movie of 2025. Number 2 is A House of Dynamite. This is the Kathryn Bigelow movie, which is all about a nuclear warhead is on its way to the mainland US, and we're following the people in, like, the control room who are, like, trying to, like, deal with it and launch countermeasures, and we follow journalists, we follow the president, we follow all these different characters at different parts of the food chain going up and down, who are making choices or reacting to it, and so on. And that sounds like a decent thriller idea, right? It sounds, you know, not the exact same plot, but definitely reminded me of Failsafe, the Sidney Lumet film that I saw for the first time last year. And the problem with this movie is that it builds itself around a gimmick that does not in any way help the story. In fact, it completely hinders the story. So they go for this multiple viewpoint thing where it kind of splits into 3. It splits into 3 perspectives, where we basically, in the first third of the movie, the first 30-40 minutes, we stick with the same room of characters pretty much. And it's all these people, Rebecca Ferguson being, like, the main actor in this section, but it's all from their perspective, and it's all from the point of when they discover this is happening, the escalation of, like, oh, it's actually serious, oh, this is actually something we have to start taking, like, major precautions for. We go through the whole steps, right? And you realize at a certain point, oh, this we've basically got a countdown timer to when this thing might hit, and that's not, you know, the runtime of the movie. That's only like 30 minutes. Like, what's happening here? And then that section of the movie ends, and it goes back to the start of the timeline, but from the perspective of other characters that we sort of got teased in the first section. We saw them at the other end of, like, video calls and things like that, but now we're going to get their side of the story throughout that half hour or so. And then it's going to happen again in the last third, where we're going to go up the food chain to, like, the president, played by Idris Elba, and we're going to see his perspective from that half hour or so. The problem with this is, though, is in any story where you're going to build it around this idea of, like, we're going to see something from one perspective, shift to a second, and then maybe a third and beyond, is that each perspective should offer something new. They should reveal new things we didn't know before. And I swear, this movie reveals almost nothing. Like, there's almost nothing in any of those second 2 sections that wasn't just assumed in that first third. Maybe we didn't see it directly, but everything just is exactly what you would think it would be from those perspectives. So it just resets the clock, and it kills the pacing, because you go back to 0, where you're back to characters before the tragedy or the crisis has started, and we have to build up again. But even worse than that, and I don't know if I've ever felt this in a movie before, a few minutes into that middle section where we reset back to 0 and we're starting to build up again, I actually started to realize, oh wait, they're going to do this again. We're going to get, like, this is not going to be the rest of the movie, this is going to be the middle third, and we're going to reset again for the final act. And that just filled me with dread. I don't know if I've ever actively been, I'm trying to think of a way of phrasing this. Like, obviously there's movies that I'm not enjoying and I'm not really looking forward to the final showdown or whatever, because I'm not really invested or caring. But that feels very different to this, which is very specifically that I am dreading having to start from scratch again. But I know it's going to happen in about 20 minutes time, and I'm actively, like, worried about it. I'm like, no, we're going to have to start from 0 again, and I'm going to be so bored. And that's the end result of this. Is that first half hour or so is actually pretty solid. It's, you know, it's tense, it's well directed. Kathryn Bigelow is a good director. She knows how to do this stuff. The problem is when it resets back to 0 in that middle section, it becomes painfully boring. because it's just a bunch of characters reacting to the exact same things that we already saw in the first third, with no new real interesting elements that shake things up or add a layer to it where you're thinking about it from a different context now or anything like that. It's just a tedious process of having to sit through the whole thing again. And then, just when you're sick of it, it does it again. And we're having to sit through the exact same beats, just from a different character's perspective, where there's nothing new being offered. It's honestly painfully boring after that first half hour. That first half hour is perfectly solid, but then the other perspectives do nothing for it. And ultimately, by the end of the movie, you just feel like, oh, we just wasted most of the time then, because nothing interesting really happens. It's honestly such a whiff. I cannot believe the choices that were made here. It was all built around this gimmick, but the gimmick doesn't actually tell any more interesting story. You know, a gimmick is fun to me when you've got like a narrative structure gimmick, or you've got a gimmick of like maybe all been set in one location or something like that. And the reason why I like those is because it forces the writing to kind of like make up for being confined and like sort of like be inventive. Like, how do we make this exciting and intense when we've only got a group of characters in a room, or we're doing, you know, like, and that's where it's okay to start with a gimmick, is almost like a writing challenge. Like, how do you make this work? But this movie feels like it was built around a gimmick, but then they didn't actually bother to actually make the gimmick work. They just did it regardless. And I don't know. I just don't know. I'm sure they were all excited about all the different actors that were in each segment, and we'll see it from their side, and we'll get to see them reacting to stuff. But that's all it is. They're just reacting to the same stuff. So there's nothing interesting about it. It's dull. It's boring. So once again, this is a movie that starts off pretty solid and then goes down the toilet. But then when you look at all the people involved, acting-wise, director-wise, it's just abysmal. Like how boring and bland it ends up feeling by the end. Like, all the energy just gets sucked out of the room after that first half hour, and it never even gets a whiff of it back. It is really quite something. So yeah, House of Dynamite, damn, like, it really disappointed me. It's number 2, so clearly it did, but like, yeah, there's that. So that leaves number 1, the most disappointing movie for me in 2025. And there was no contest here for me, actually, despite how passionate I got about the last two. Because, 5 and 4, they were, disappointing, but not terrible movies necessarily. And then I was pretty passionate about Drop and House of Dynamite. My number 1 most disappointing movie of 2025 is by far The Wolfman. Or just Wolfman, I guess. But Leigh Whannell's Wolfman. Why is that disappointing? Because Leigh Whannell started directing movies. He'd been writing movies for a long time, right? He was writing movies back when the first Saw came out. He was the co-writer on that, or whatever. And he started directing movies with the third Insidious, which I actually think is pretty good, right? That was a pleasant surprise for me back when that came out. I thought it was a fun, standalone Insidious story. Not for everyone, if you don't like, the franchise and the horror genre or whatever, but like, I had fun with it. And then he did Upgrade, which was an interesting sci-fi movie that kind of whiffed the ending a bit for me, but like, there was a lot of inventive stuff with how he captured and did certain like story ideas in that movie, so there was a lot of potential there, even though it ultimately wasn't a complete success by the end. There was a lot of potential for his future projects. And then he made The Invisible Man in 2020, and that movie is great. Like, it felt like he reached this zenith of like, oh, this is what he's capable of. This is a great new modern horror movie, a good spin on a classic idea, but very, very different. And, I think me and Tim, when we reviewed that on streams, we raved about it. It was great, and it made it instantly exciting for whatever Whannell was going to do next. And when they announced, oh, he's doing Wolfman, another classic Universal monster character, it felt like, oh, that's a great idea. Like, yeah, let him do more of these classic things with new spins, and it should be fun. And then the movie comes out, and it is one of the dullest things I have ever watched. Like, it's weird to say something's aggressively uninteresting, because those words shouldn't really go together. But this movie is aggressively uninteresting. The characters are unlikable. It focuses around a family, a mum, a dad, and a kid. And the dad's the one who ultimately is going to get bit by a wolf and kind of slowly start to turn. And that's the premise. And they're out of this house in the middle of nowhere as he's starting to turn. But I felt nothing for these characters. I felt nothing for their interactions. The movie's absurdly dark and kind of unpleasant to watch, so it doesn't look very good. The characters, like I say, are just so unlikable, and every time they try to do a moment where it's like, oh, he looks like he's starting to turn, and we'll see how the wife reacts, and they're in kind of a rocky stage in their relationship, which I get from a writing perspective, trying to do that, of like, hey, they need to patch things up, and then things go really bad because of horror shenanigans. But honestly, I almost think that this script, or that this movie, should be studied on an academic level for just how much it somehow just does not work. When it's not even like there's like massive big stupid things that it does. It's not like there's like obvious like telltale signs of just like shitty movie making or whatever. It's just it's like an assembly of a million things that just do not work. And just I honestly, I'm lost for words. I'm lost for words for just how miserable an experience watching Wolfman 2025 was. And it's not like the previous Wolfman movie that came out in like 2011 or whatever it was terrible. Like, the previous competition should have made this look like gold almost no matter what it was, and I'm not even sure this one was even any better. I don't know. It was a tedious movie to watch. At least something that's aggressively horrific and making stupid decisions can be funny, right? You know, I hate Strangers Chapter 2, right? That came out last year, one of the worst movies of the year by far. But at the very least, like, there's some car crash quality to, like, wait, they're making this decision? Why is this happening? This is stupid. And there's nothing like that in Wolfman. It's just, like, they try and do some stuff where it's like, oh, we're seeing things from his perspective, and it's like, oh, he's starting to turn, so he's seeing things look less normal and less human, and how that's affecting his judgment, and like we're seeing kind of his mind breakdown kind of thing. Like, there's commendable ideas for maybe, like, I could see why it was thought to be a good idea and why or where it could maybe have went with that, but none of it works. None of it's enough to save any of it. It's, you know, it's not a super long movie, but it felt like an eternity getting through that film. It's just so much of the movie is just in a dark house with three characters who do not like each other. Like, that's the movie. That's the movie. And any attempts of actual horror or action is just deeply dull. I can't think of another word for it. I almost feel like I'm failing here to eloquently put anything into words here, but I genuinely am a little dumbfounded, because it's not, like I said, it's not like there's some big obvious things like most bad movies to kind of like pinpoint and say this, and this is the problem. Like, yeah, I can say the characters suck, but why do they suck? Why are they so unlikable? And it's all three of them, right? All three of them, maybe the kids, whatever, but like the two parents are insufferably, like, just unlikable. And it's not like they're over the top or obnoxious, and you know, they clearly don't like each other, right? And that's kind of the point. Their marriage is in a bad place right now, but there's like usually like a little slither of hope, or they seem to care about their kid or something, so they're putting in the effort to try and keep up appearances or make it work or whatever. Everything about it is just depressing to sit through, and not in a good, like, oh, I'm watching a movie that's getting into the dark side of the soul and I'm enjoying kind of the like, you know, a good exploration of torture and inner turmoil and trauma and all the other things. No, it's just miserably depressing to watch, and with no redeeming qualities. And the fact that this came from someone who just a few years prior made a genuinely great movie and made it seem like a perfect idea to do another movie like that, but with another Universal monster, but he didn't have a cool new take on it. You know, Invisible Man had like cool new ideas for how to use the concept, and cool new ways to tie it into the modern world, and like the allegories, and you know, because Invisible Man 2020 is all about the idea of an abusive boyfriend who's invisible, so no one believes the woman that he's being abusive, right? It's tying into all these ideas of victims not being believed. It has so much like weight in the modern world and ties it perfectly into the concept of what the Invisible Man is. And then Wolfman has nothing. It has nothing. And the Wolfman doesn't even look very good. To top it all off, it looks like shit. There you go. That's my 5 most disappointing movies of 2025. I thought this may be a fun follow up to the top 10, just to be a little negative, but also just kind of have an excuse to sort of assess other things that happen movie wise throughout the year. So, by all means, what are your disappointing movies of 2025 in the comments? And also, if you enjoyed me doing this, I will, consider doing it again next year and beyond. Every time I do a top 10 for a new year, maybe not when I do a classic year, just because it's kind of weird to like look at the bad movies from like an old year that I've only seen in passing over some time. All of these are still quite fresh in my head because they're all from last year, but anyway, that is me. If you want to support the channel and all the different things that we do here, all the movie podcasts, and if you want more things like top 10s and 5 disappointings and what else, let me know. But you can support all that and help keep it coming over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And of course, you get some bonuses over there. Like you get the bonus rating runs down segments for some of the shows, even more screams. Extra Reels is maybe the crown jewel, which is the monthly show with me and David reviewing some of the worst movies ever made. That's where War of the Worlds 2025 was reviewed. It was on that show. So we just did Catwoman with Halle Berry, or it's about to come out, but we recorded it already. So yeah, go check out all that. But thanks to everyone who already supports us. It is deeply appreciated. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.